All right, so today I am with Mike Shay. Mike is from Steinmiller Associates in Webster, New York. I am so thankful to have worked with him and his team there with multiple clients and actually myself, my own insurance needs. So Mike has really become quite the guru of healthcare insurance, and he has a wide range of things we could talk about. But today I've asked Mike if we could actually just focus on physicians that are in residency, preparing to come out of residency, join the workforce, and what type of insurance are they going to need, and recognize that that's going to be different depending on what they choose for their career path. So if they're going to become a health system employee, as in either a practice where they're employed, or if they're in the hospital, or if they own their own practice. So Mike, thanks for joining me today. So what can you tell us about that, what their needs will be?
Yeah, you bet. Good morning, and thank you for having me. Love the format. I would say we'll start with the scenario where they go to work in a practice.
Sounds good.
Really should have
As an employee or an owner?
Employee.
Gotcha. All right.
You'd still want to have an awareness of the malpractice coverage, which is truly first and foremost.
Okay.
There are scenarios where they may be covered under that practices, added to that practice, and it's a really good step to be aware of those limits, the retention, perhaps deductible.
Sure.
And although they may not be the ultimate decision maker on that, at least be welcomed, I'll say, into the room.
Yep.
To be aware of it, certainly be aware of the coverage forms,
sure.
the cost point. That's an area where we have seen, those costs are increasing.
For sure.
It's a marketplace that I would also advise them to have an awareness. There's thankfully several options, but there's probably a few that they may have never heard of. An introduction be worth their time.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Would you say that the standard coverage is typically the 3 million?
You see that quite common, but it may depend on the area of practice, perhaps size of the entity they're coming into.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Sure.
And it's great to consult with, we're an independent agency. We promote, we encourage that. And what we always try to bring to the table, whether it's a professional coverage on down to an individual, is that consultative relationship.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, much the same way in the service and practice that you provide.
Sure.
We want to take that coverage apart.
Yeah.
Explain endorsements, exclusions. And that's really, to me, the best way to be educated on any coverage that you look at.
Okay.
What does it cover? What are some of the unique features? And let's see what is excluded. Because if you're not aware of those things, sometimes you can buy back coverage through endorsements or perhaps other products, but it's really very key to be aware of those things.
Got it. Okay. So that's if they're an employee of a practice. What if they own their own practice?
Yeah.
Changes a lot, right?
It does. I mean,
yeah.
I would say you want a firsthand consultative review of every coverage, starting with, of course, again, the malpractice, but even their straightforward property and liability.
Sure. Yeah.
We may have touched on a little bit, but I've just completed a class through the Hartford, review of commercial insurances. And I found the lease agreement that they may enter into to open their new facility space to be such an important aspect to, again, consult, have somebody that's, a licensed insurance agent
Definitely. Yeah.
Section, you may or may not be aware of what you're contractually signing off to with the landlord.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think we've all learned that lesson going through COVID, or maybe not us, but people we know. I'm sure clients that you have learned that lesson the hard way this last year.
You're right, and it's changed. Perhaps some landlords have been a little bit above and beyond and perhaps extended some courtesies there that, it's a good thing. Obviously, they're trying to work with their tenants and retain them long range. We got to take apart a case example, which was a large medical practice.
Yeah,
And perhaps the scenario after a loss. I could also see with COVID of, a scenario, what happens if either party has to terminate the lease based on what's happened.
sure. Yeah. That's the thing too, is like outside of just the lease, all the legalities of that this last year, there's been so many new laws that have come about. It's so difficult to just have a handle on all of it. It's been challenging for sure.
Yeah, I would say, they're going to see a change in the, commercial real estate. Now, maybe that's good if they're starting into a practice and seeking, that space or the right arrangement. But I would include that in the review, and at least making sure that it meshes with your coverage scenario, because if it ever doesn't, and you're finding that out on claim day, you could be in for some finger pointing between yourself and your landlord.
Sure. That's never good.
No, and we want to help and counsel there. I would think, and you could probably speak to it firsthand. I mean, we've seen a lot of scenarios where betterments and improvements may be made to the space that they end up renting, leasing. And, where does the coverage responsibility lie
Sure.
for the upgrades they made to that space?
Yeah.
Again, we're coming back to that lease that says the tenant is 100% responsible, or you could see a lease that perhaps is silent.
Yeah. 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 Lots to think about for sure.
Yep.
So now we've covered if they're an employee, we've covered if they own their own practice.
Yeah.
As far as the employee, we only covered on the side of if they're an employee in a practice. What if they come out of residency and now they're an employee in a hospital? They're working as a doctor in a hospital. What kind of coverage do they need? What would they need?
In that scenario, a great one, so much I'm going to say is taken care of.
Sure.
In that
Yeah, absolutely.
they're picked up on the larger malpractice. There's certainly no concern about, the premises liability, coverage for the equipment.
Sure. So in either scenario, whether they're employed or they're employee, we know they obviously need malpractice. And as an employee, likely the employer is going to take care of that, especially if they're in the hospital. Although I have seen in practices where they expect physicians that come in to do that on their own. I have seen that. So you would obviously be a great resource regardless. If they're going to be an owner, they would need malpractice plus a number of liability insurance. In saying that, if they're an employee, do they need any liability insurance, in your opinion, beyond the malpractice, beyond what they're going to look at with their benefits?
I'd say yes, and it's more so on a personal level.
Sure.
And this is pretty consistent, whatever your profession is.
Mm-hmm.
We would strongly recommend a personal umbrella.
Gotcha. Okay.
Is going to extend your personal liability, which could go over your home, renters, and another big one is that auto.
Gotcha. Okay.
So.
And how is that so, like, if they were to get sued, then that stuff is protected? Is that why? Okay.
Yeah, and you're buying, in many cases, an additional $1 million limit. you
Sure.
know, over your personal liability. And I always bring up auto just because you just don't know.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
I drive for work. You know, you're out there enough, and it, heaven forbid, if I were to ever cause the accident, I'll use my coverage as an example. I
Yep.
have $1 million umbrella over my home, my personal liability, and my auto. And I'm just going to ballpark that. I mean, obviously, each case is underwritten by the variables, driving record, you know, your home, what other things might you have, boat, ATV, snowmobile. But I mean, my umbrella is an extremely reasonable cost point to
Okay.
give you that peace of mind. In my case, I'm going to ballpark, it's under $200 annually to have
Gotcha.
that.
Yeah. And you're fully protected then.
It's such a crucial piece. I mean, you may get to the point, especially as a physician and going into private practice, where you may say, I'd like to explore 2, 3, 4, 5 million
Sure.
personal umbrella, depending on, you know, what assets, you know, what things and comfort level you may need. Those resources are there, and it's much better to consider that early on versus waiting, and you never want to find out the hard way.
Yeah.
I could have pulled that coverage after it happened.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate your time today and just spending time with me answering these questions. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, I appreciate it. We welcome
Yeah.
questions in any
Yeah.
of those areas, and it's just such a good conversation to have on any
Sure.
level. And
Yeah.
sometimes the little things you bring up could make a big difference.
I'll make sure to put your contact information in the comment section, so if anyone wants to reach out directly, they can do so. My last question would be, why Steinmiller?
Yeah, thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
With us, we're fortunate. We're independent agents, which means we work for our customers. We bring multiple A-rated insurance carriers, choices, coverage, and we remain with you, you know, throughout. So our goal is to continue to consult, recommend changes, you know, have the ability when pricing changes or scenario changes to, again, continue to give you options. And we're fortunate, you know, that the agency's been in business, you know, almost 30 years, and it's the independent model is one I feel very strongly about.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that way on the healthcare side, so I completely understand. Well,
Awesome.
thanks again, Mike. I truly appreciate your time. So Mike Shay, Steinmiller Insurance, malpractice, liability, any type of insurance questions, this is your guide for sure. Thanks, Mike.
Excellent. Thank you, Missy. Take care.